Kaushal, welcome you all in today's episode of Science Simplified only on Bharata First. Through this platform, we provide a unique opportunity to ask questions related to science and technology, which will be answered by the experts. Let your curiosity out and ask questions through a form whose link has been provided in the description box below. Do make use of this opportunity. Now, I would like to introduce to a science expert, Dr. T.V. Venkateshwaran, who is here with us to answer the questions sent to us by our viewers last week. Dr. T.V. Venkateshwaran is a senior scientist at Vigyan Prasar, New Delhi. He is also founder of India Science Wire. He writes regular columns on developments related to science, technology, and society. So, the first question for today is:
Hello, sir. My name is Sai Shri. Being a computer student, I have a question. Many developed countries say yes to cryptocurrency, but why India banned and even announced some jail term? Is there any specific and genuine reason behind this?
If you look at the cryptocurrency story with regard to India, okay, so in 2013 you had some few exchanges which opened, and it gained momentum in 2014. About 20 small exchanges opened. Okay, there was a first recommendation about the crypto coins in 2017, where the government said that this cryptocurrency is prone to be misused. It can become a Ponzi scheme. It can become a scam. It can help terrorism. And then it wanted to curb the Bitcoin. Okay, so that's where the action from the government of India began. And around 2018, the finance minister said that it's not a legal tender, which of course it was not a legal tender. There was no doubt about that. But then it brought in a question of whether Bitcoin is legal within India. Around 2018, the RBI banned the Bitcoin or all kinds of cryptocurrency, in fact. And then uh, I mean, you had the government recommending that it may even uh, put people in jail for 10 years, hefty fines in a recommendation in 2019, a panel. And in 2020, March, the court lifted the ban of the ban related to uh, cryptocurrency was lifted by the court in 2020. Okay, so this is what happened in the government sector. The basically the government response is based on the 2017 recommendation, where it said that there'll be a complete ban. Okay, it will be considered as a major offense with non-bailable and cognizable, which means that any person can give a complaint on that. Okay, and up to 10 years jail. These are all the provisions which were proposed in that recommendation. If you look at the cryptocurrency regulations around the world, if you look at 2018, that is broadly before the pandemic hit. Okay, so various countries have different kinds of regulation. Like for example, in European Union, for dealing with the cryptocurrency, you need KYC, right? I mean, so the user should be not anonymous. Okay, of course there are laws which varies from place to place, right? So in Korea, there is a proposal to ban. Okay, the China has banned, right? So these are all various responses that you see around the world. There are a few countries which have said that it will accept as a legal tender, but they are all kind of so small. I mean, they don't count in a world economy in a big way. So in 2021, the government came up with a new proposal. It's called a draft national strategy on blockchain. So basically, what the government did is that it took a blockchain, a technology, uh, delinked it from cryptocurrency. Okay, so blockchain, the government said that it will start using, and it also envisaged creation of national level blockchain framework, a national framework. But then there is a bill which is tabled in Parliament, Cryptocurrency Regulation and Official Digital Currency Bill 2021. This is not at the table. It's on the development stage. So it will prohibit all private cryptocurrencies, and the RBI perhaps will start a cryptocurrency. Okay, and a center of excellence to work on blockchain has been created under this initiative by the government at this point of time. So the Ministry of Information and Technology is working. Number of agencies under it are working to develop this national level blockchain framework. So blockchain, they are looking at using not just only in cryptocurrency, but for other document management and so on. Right. So that's something that the government is looking at this now. One of the main reason for government to say that we will not go with the private cryptocurrency is that although the RBI is has said that because of the Supreme Court order, there is no exactly ban in cryptocurrency in India, but advise due diligence. Okay, the main fear the government is having is that the cryptocurrencies can be used to circumvent capital controls. It can be used for money laundering. It can be used for illegal economic transactions. Okay, and it can be risky for investors. And in India, only small number of players are there in the market, so money market. So if it itself becomes risky, then it may cause major chaos in India's money market. These are the fears that government has with regard to Bitcoin. In terms of technology per se, or the science per se, there is no big issue with regard to Bitcoin in that sense, except, of course, for purely economic reasons, which are, of course, also scientific. We can't say that they are not scientific, but they are not the scientific the way we usually mean scientific. That's all, right?
Namaskar. My name is Rishabh Sharma. I have completed my engineering from Pundarika University, Jhansi in stream Electronics and Communication. Currently, I am preparing for Combined Defense Service examination. My question is, what is the science behind geoinformatics? And I want to know the application of geoinformatics precisely in three fields. First, military; second, disaster management; and third, agriculture. Thank you.
So, GIS, Geospatial Informatics, basically, is trying to collect different kinds of spatial information and integrating them. Okay, number one, today we have higher potential to collect information, spatial information, because we can have remote sensing satellites which can scan the ground in multiple wavelengths. So, which means, sorry, we will take a break. I'll repeat this answer. Just hold on. Huh?
So the second question is, what is science behind geoinformatics? What are its application in field of disaster management and agriculture?
Very excellent question. I mean, geoinformatics is a new area that has emerged in the recent past because of two technological developments. One is with the remote sensing satellite, we are now able to get wealth of geographical information. I mean, you can use optical camera, you can use various other cameras in different wavelengths, okay, from a remote sensing satellite, and get ground information like water bodies, the terrain usage, roads. You can look at, for example, groundwater. You can look at the agricultural land. What is the level of agriculture that is happening there? Whether the agricultural land is having enough water, or is it starving of moisture? Many information that you can get. Uh, they are all different layers. Like this, they are all different layers. But with the computer, what you can do is that you can combine them. So these are the two important technology that has come into together to create this geoinformatics. So geoinformatics, if you look at clearly, is having two legs. Let's say one is a science, the other is engineering. In science, you are looking at geography, cartography, okay, and in engineering, you are looking at surveying, mapping, and remote sensing engineering, and you are able to combine all that and then get a lot of informations like geographical science, geographical information science, geomatics engineering, and remote sensing science and technology. Let's look at, for example, geomatics engineering. Very simple, one simple explanation for it. Let's say, for example, if I want to develop a water body, okay, we need to store water, so I need to create an artificial lake. Okay, where do I create the artificial lake? Right. So number one, that should be a depression, right? So that you don't have to dig too much. Number two, it should be a place where the water bodies, surface water bodies are drainaging into. Not it should not be drainaging out. Okay, so all this you can get by this geoinformatics system, where you can combine multiple layers. Okay, so you can look at, for example, the survey network. You can look at the corners and boundaries. You can look at the parcel framework, ownership. Okay, so all this kinds of information can be put together. You can also put orthography, hydrography, that is water levels, and so on and so forth. Okay, so in agriculture, if you look at it, one of the area that people are looking at in using agriculture is essentially in what is called as precision agriculture. So in precision agriculture, for example, one of the area is conservation of water, groundwater. Okay, so where should I put the recharge wells? Where should I put wells for drawing water? Okay, so if we have all information available with us, this kind of multiple layer information available with us, like say for example, here you have different layers of information. I can put them together, and then I can find out what exactly we need to do for conservation, right? So this is a way, for example, in precision agriculture it is being used. In another way, for example, is that today we have something called as hyperspectral camera. This hyperspectral camera, what it will do is that the sunlight, when it falls, it is not only visible light, but also other wavelengths, right? So when they get reflected, so different wavelengths are captured here. From that, analysis, you can come to some conclusion about the ground. Like say, for example, whether there is a nitrogen deficiency, whether it is any micronutrient deficiency, whether there is water deficiency, and then you can precisely give input as required. Today, you are applying to the whole field, not only your field, but also the neighbor's field. In fact, almost the whole village uses a similar amount of fertilizers and pesticides, but that's not really needed. So, this kind of precision agriculture, geoinformatics will help. Okay, so using this kind of information, the geoinformatics, like you have a soil map, soil test, past year yield, all this you put together, you plan your land, what do you expect, how much you expect, and then whether you should put input or not. If your past yields are always been very low, no point in putting additional input, because that's going to only create loss, right? So these kinds of decision making can be done with geoinformatics. That is the main usage in agriculture. Similarly, for example, crop yield. Today we are talking about crop insurance. Crop yield information is required for various purposes, okay, including stabilizing the agricultural market, right? So we can get information through remote sensing data, and then using artificial network, we can make a guesstimate of the crop yield. So even if one is planning for, let's say, compensation for not enough yield in the ground condition and so on, because of maybe, let's say, flood or whatever it is, okay, so one can use this kind of geoinformatics to arrive at a better decision making. So these are all various things. When you come to disaster management, you can find out in an urban area, for example, if there is going to be a rain, which are the areas which will get flooded for different levels of rain. Okay. Similarly, you can find out, for example, in urban area, what are the heat islands. So in those heat islands, you may have to make special effort to grow plants or let's say urban forests to ensure that the weather does not become unbearable in that urban pockets. Okay, so various kinds of planning for urban areas. Let's say, for example, during disaster like heavy rains or things of that kind can be planned using geoinformatics. So basically, the idea is that you have earlier we had only maps. Okay, on the maps we can maybe plot, but once you plot, you cannot erase it. But with computer, you can time series. You know, when the time changes, you can modify so that I mean you can have a evolving picture of let's say it's like a evolving map where various parameters are given. Like say for example, if you buy a tourist map, it will show you roads and railway lines, right? But if you buy a political map, it will be giving more emphasis on borders and things of that kind, right? So, like that, there are many layers of information that you can add. So, you can add information related to agriculture, you can add information related to surface water. You can combine such information and then come to some conclusion, evidence based conclusion for policy making. So, this is the main usage of geoinformatics in disaster management and agriculture and so on.
Hello, sir. Myself Rajdeep Shaha, currently doing post graduation from Jadavpur University, West Bengal. Alongside, I am also preparing for UPSC. My question to you is, sir, what is mass extinction? Along with it, I would also like to ask, will there be any mass extinction in near future which can be triggered by climate change?
A very important question in today's time because just now the seventh IPCC report has come about which I'm not going to talk about now, maybe something else, which is told us that the evolving scenario is not very encouraging. I mean, slightly it's bleak if one has to say so. Okay, so from that point of view, this mass extinction question is a very very important question. Earth has faced five mass extinction till today. What do you mean by mass extinction? What we mean by mass extinction is that today, if you look, for example, in the world, there are various species. Okay, there are many types of fishes, there are many types of crocodiles, there are many types of birds, so on and so forth. Okay, if suppose suddenly within a very short duration, we are talking about geological short duration, so which may be about 40,000 years to a lakh of years. That's a short duration from geological timing. Within that short duration, so let's say assume that many species become extinct. For example, we know that once upon a time there were dinosaurs. Today it's not there. Dinosaurs is an extinct species, right? Similarly, like if many species extinct at the same time, then you call it as mass extinction. So the first mass extinction took place about 440 million years ago, where about 85% of various species vanished. When we talk about 85%, we are talking about the species variety, not the numbers. It's not like, for example, there were 1,000 elephants and 85 died. We are talking about elephant, ant, rat. If you put some 100 animals like that, 85 vanished. Okay, so after that you don't find them at all. I mean, it's vanished from planet Earth. So that happened around 440 years. Then there was another extinction about 374 million years ago, where about 75% mass extinction took place. The premium mass extinction, which took place about 250 million years ago, is the largest so far we know. Almost 95% of all species, including marine animals, became extinct. Okay, and literally people said that that's a time perhaps the life could have been completely shut, and maybe a new life system could have perhaps evolved in Earth. That's a kind of precarious situation that premium extinction was there. Jurassic extinction, something that we all know because that's when the dinosaurs. Sorry, that's not dinosaurs. That's before dinosaurs. That's about 2000. That's the period when Dinosaurs became dominant. I'm sorry. Then the Cretaceous, that is about 145 million years ago. That's when you had your Dinosaurs extinction happening, right? So these are all five known big extinction in the world history. People are saying that currently we are witnessing the sixth mass extinction, basically because of the human-induced climate change. Okay, the rates are changing. What are the reasons for extinction? Maybe there is some climate change, maybe natural or human-induced. There may be loss of habitat. Let's say, for example, there has been less amount of rain for continuously for a number of years, then that area will become drought prone. So if a place becomes a drought prone, plants which are growing in water rich condition cannot grow, right? So for those plants, the habitat is lost. But now, for example, plants which can survive in drought condition will come and occupy, right? So for them, it's a better opportunity. Okay, so loss of appetite can happen. Sometimes you can also have lack of genetic diversity. See, one of the important problem about elephants in India we are talking about is the problem of genetic diversity. Basically because the forest areas have become patchy, spot, there is no interconnection. Okay, so some number of elephants are living in this spot and some number are living there. So now this number of elephants have to interbreed. So genetically they'll become somewhat similar. Okay, so then it's a loss of genetic diversity, which may make those elephants die off. I mean, may become sterile and so on and so forth. That is why one of the mitigation effort we are creating animal corridors. Tigers will be able to roam a larger distance, so that there'll be a better genetic diversity and so on. Okay, these are all various causes of this. There are a number of natural causes. It's not that always only human induced. There may be climate heating and cooling because of, let's say, Earth's orbit itself keeps on changing. You know, in a million years, in 40,000 years, there are some changes. So that may get affected. Sea level may change, and that may create change in the kind of species which will be able to live. Sometimes asteroids or space rock are causes. Like, say, for example, the Cretaceous one is suspected to be because of asteroid collision. Cosmic radiation, which is something that is happening every time in our background, can cause mutation, and because of that mutation, for example, some species may be completely lost. This also can happen. So these are all things that happen. So diseases, acid rain, invasive species, these are also causes for extinction. Along with that, human-induced extinction is also one of the major challenge today. When the environment of the species changes faster than the species can adopt, the species become extinct. That's essentially the important point. If you look at from 1500, the rate of extinction, okay, the rate of extinction in mammal, if you look at the rate of extinction, today it's very high. It's very high. Mammal, birds, vertebrates, other vertebrates, it's very high. But this is a background. Background meaning this is a natural one. If the extinction are happening natural level, only this much should be happening. But what we are seeing is a heightened level of extinction. That is because of the human-induced climate change, loss of habitat. I mean, we are cutting off forests and so on and so forth. So these are all the important challenges in the extinction. Extinction, if you look at whether it can happen in near future or not, naturally, whether a asteroid can hit her or not, the percentage is very low. But it's not that nothing will happen. Of course, we know that at least for next few decades, nothing will happen because we are monitoring all the space rocks which are near Earth, right? So we have a capacity today. So we know that at least for next few decades, we are not going to have any surprises. But long term is a chance.
Hello sir, my name is Chandan Kumar. I am BTech graduate in manufacturing engineering. Sir, my question is, When bullet leaves the barrel, it keeps rotating. So how does the rotational motion of bullet helps it to travel in the air? And how does the physics work here? Jai Hind.
Interesting and very observational question. So let me just share the screen. Okay. So if you look at the modern bullets, okay, I mean modern guns, okay, it is bored in such a way that when the projectile leaves, I mean it's not only in handgun, but it's also in rifles and it's also in cannons. Okay, it's not only in handheld weapons, but also in cannons and other infantry weapons. Okay, they are bored in such a way that when the projectile leaves, that is the bullet leaves, it rotates, okay, on its axis. Not rotate like this. I mean, we should not think that it is rotating like it's rotating like this. It's not rotating like this. Okay, it rotates like this or this way, whichever way. Okay, but you also have down board, smooth board, where the projectile comes out. See, when the projectile comes out, then here it will be tumbling. Why it will be tumbling? Because if the projectile is perfectly fitting this bore hole, then there'll be friction, right? So because of the friction, the projectile cannot come out. So whatever is the bore hole, the projectile has to be little bit smaller than that. So when the projectile is coming through that bore hole, let's say one part of that projectile might touch the bore hole at one point of time, and as the projectile moves, because of the aerodynamic lift, the projectile may hit the bore hole in some other point, right? So it hits in multiple points and comes out. So when it comes out, the projectile will be tumbling. This is something that we have observed in our daily life. For example, if you have played top, okay, you spin a top. After some time, you will find that the top head itself is spinning, right? It's not straight. The axis itself is spinning, right? So that's what happens to a projectile that you throw. Okay, that will have tumbling effect. But if I have a bore with the boring and then I make it spin, then it can go almost in a straight line. Okay, so that's what happens to a bullet. Why it goes in a straight line? That has to do with something called as conservation of angular momentum. I'll tell you a very simple example. You can try it out. Okay, you have a cycle. Okay, so what you do is that you ask somebody to hold the handlebar up. Okay, so you need at least 2 3 people to do this experiment. You hold the handlebar up, you rotate the wheel. Okay, let the wheel rotate very fast. When you rotate the wheel fast, try to turn your handlebar. You will find that when you are turning it on one side, you will find a force which is trying to turn back. This is called inertia of angular momentum. That is basically when something is rotating, it prefers to be in the same direction. The rotation prefers to be in the same direction, so it comes back. So when a bullet is rotating, if it tumbles, it will try to come back. Okay, so it will come back to its own position. That's why you make the bullet rotate, spin while coming out. Okay, so you make the bore like this. If you look at it, inside it you will have a bore like this. Because of this, the bullet will spin. That's what is happening, so that you can make the bullet travel in a straight line because of the conservation of angular momentum. Of course, it won't be exactly a straight line because there will be gravitational effect, so it will be traveling in a projectile, but still, as much as possible, it will be in a almost straight line so that you will be able to hit the target.
Hello everyone, this is Gaurav and I have recently completed my class 12 from Jamia. So my question is, what is the science behind the recent discovery of self-healing materials by the Indian scientists? I mean, how are they gonna work? And can you please enlighten me on the concept of bipyrazole and piezoelectric molecular substances? Thank you.
Very important question. Uh, basically what has happened is that a group of Indian scientists at IISER Kolkata and IIT Kharagpur has jointly developed this material, which is a piezoelectric molecular crystal. So let's understand this word. Piezoelectric is basically a kind of a crystal where if you apply pressure, there is a potential difference that happens. If you apply pressure, there is a electric current that can be produced. Okay, so that is piezoelectric. In schools, many children will be doing this kind of a project, right? So speed bumpers, you keep the piezoelectric. So when the car bumps on it, the electricity can be generated. You know, this is a kind of normal school projects. Many of us would have seen. Some of us might have also seen. It's a piezoelectric material like that. Okay, so that's a material. So what this is happening, what's happening in this is that suppose if this is a piezoelectric material, okay, a particular kind of crystal, and let's suppose if there is a fracture, okay, so there is a fracture. That fracture happens because of some collision. Let's say it's a thin layer of cover of, let's say, space shuttle. So in the thin layer of space shuttle, let's assume that one micro meteoroid comes and falls. Okay, so there'll be a crack, right? So when there is a fracture like this, then because remember that the piezoelectric material has been hit by something, so which has been facing a pressure, right? So I told you that when you press a piezoelectric material, electric current is generated. So in the same way, when something falls on this material, electrical charge is created, where in one side you have positive, the other side negative, and we all know that the positive attracts negative, right? So now these two fractured surfaces will attract each other and then will become joined together. Okay, so that's self-healing. So when there is a fracture, the gap doesn't remain. The gap immediately closes because of the joining of this material. Okay, so this is a simple idea behind this self-healing metal. This kind of self-healing materials are needed in many places. For example, sealing in space, because in space there are sand grain sized micrometeoroids. Okay, they will come and continuously fall. When they fall, they can create small cracks, right? So if the cracks actually deepens, then the whole spacecraft can explode, because inside the spacecraft you have pressurized air, right? So it's like putting a pin on a balloon. Okay, so you need a self-healing material so that it can close. Like many such applications are useful for this self-healing material. This is a material that they have developed. It's a very interesting concept. Okay, you can use it in microchips where you don't want the chips to have fracture. Okay, mechanical sensor, actuators, micro robots. So this self-healing material has used in many such applications. Okay.
Thank you, sir, for an insightful explanation of the question. On this note, it's a wrap up of today's episode of Science Simplified only on Bharata First. Be scientific, be inquisitive. Please like, share, and subscribe to such amazing content on Bharata First. See you soon.